You are listening to the North American Kings podcast, your traditional masculinity training ground. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski, founder of North American Kings LLC, a leadership development company based in Cincinnati, Ohio. As we all know, the man brand has taken an absolute beating over the past few decades, and it's our mission to change that. We're going to do that by helping you join the fight to reclaim traditional masculine values. Welcome to headquarters. Training starts now. Welcome back to the training ground, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski. I am on fire this month, and we've done some work to bring that energy into this show today, so I'm very excited to be here. Having said that, let's get started. As always, we want to thank our sponsor, Naked Armor Razors and Wet Shave Gear, for their continued support for our mission. For those who think that straight razors are all this company provides, think again. They are also partnered with several companies to help provide all of your wet shave gear. One thing that no one really taught me about was aftershave. Aftershave is meant to clean and close pores, nicks, and cuts in your skin, keeping bacteria out and preventing irritation. This also helps smooth things over, prevent redness. You guys know what I'm talking about. But the fact is that it smells great also, adds to the positive benefits of the soothing purpose that this product serves. Elevate your shave by getting some today. I'm partial to the Voyager model, just to be honest with you. But right now, my listeners can use coupon code KINGS15 in order to take advantage of a 15% discount on anything in the Naked Armor online store. Don't wait to start enjoying the highest quality shave you'll ever give yourself. Go to nakedarmorrazors.com. That's nakedarmorrazors.com. All right, so I've got to be honest, this episode was largely unplanned. Now, that's why I absolutely love doing this. This episode was going to be about building brotherhood, which is wildly important for men to understand and even more important for us to feel. However, one thing after another just seems to physically pull me towards the to this subject matter that we're going to discuss today. So fine, universe, I got the message. All right, message received. Ladies and gentlemen, this week we're going to be talking about one major thing and one way men experience it, okay? So I want to start off with a quote. A man says to a boy, "I'll be out to throw knives right after I switch out the laundry." Manliest thing I've ever said. Now, this quote was from a father of a friend of mine and to his grandson. Now, I wasn't around to hear this, but I was told about it, and the idea rings true for me. And some feedback that I've gotten from a friend of the show is that sometimes the content is great, but we don't touch on why enough. Now, that's the truth behind 1,000 different experiences I've partaken in business, in life. The why can always be more defined. Now, philosophers have asked the question since the dawn of time, why? Why this? Why that? And I wonder if it's because the why always seems to be shifting slightly. Moreover, in business, sometimes it's easy to get swept up in the how something happens, that the purpose, the why, often gets, lost in the focus, in the pursuit of do. So, to my close friend, thank you for the feedback. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, I never back away from hammering a nail harder. So, as for the purpose of this podcast and all the associated ventures that we're trying to create here, we're trying to build better men. Men of principle, men of virtue, real men. For too long, the husks that we are have been crafted by hands that do not know or do not want us to reach our full potential. All right, now by embracing traditional masculine values, you can live a more fulfilled life, one where you feel complete, solid, and ready for what life throws at you. But wait, there's more. It's not just that you will benefit from this. Everyone you interact will take away something of who you are. That's part of social interaction. When we interact with real men, the modern kings around all of us, all of us come away better. Everyone does. Boys, girls, women, other men, children, everyone. Now, the U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health study Age differences in adults' daily social interaction found that on average, adults engage in roughly 12 personal interactions a day. So if every day were average, that's around 4,380 people that you will interact with in a given year. Now, even if it's half of that, that's still over 2,000 interactions that you will make personally or professionally. Now, with every one of those reactions, or of those interactions, if every one of those interactions left the recipients better, imagine the world we live in. So why spend your time being active or becoming good at something or staying in shape? These states of being will protect you and from this void in your soul that will consume your well-being the more and more it grows. So why practice the cardinal responsibilities? Because doing so will strengthen you as a person, prepare you for the world, and ultimately leave you both, or actually leave you both and the people, well, both you and the people around you better off and better provided for. Remember, Immanuel Kant mentioned universal norms. Imagine the world where everyone operated under certain maxims. I'd like to see a maxim of manhood. Now, part of this is, part of the greater point here is that men don't necessarily agree on what makes a man and what makes not. Back to the original quote that started this episode, it started me thinking about this. Hey, I'm gonna go throw knives. Manly. Right after I finish the laundry. Awesome. Now, some guys would have a problem with that. They'd say, hey, you're not, do the laundry. That can wait, or that's not manly. And we continue to see different camps forming on who believes what is manly. Right? And I'm going to make a case, and that's the purpose of us being here in every episode. We try to make a point that doing this will make you more manly. You will feel more manly, and thusly you will feel more complete. And a complete you is a better you, and a better you affects people around you more profoundly. All right, so this is a case that we're going to be making every day, every show. We're going to make the point that what we're telling you is something to try. And I'm willing to bet if you're open to it, you will actually feel the difference. Try it or not. Try it and then abandon it. I tried smoking a tobacco pipe this week, right? I smoke cigars. I mean, I've mentioned that before. But somebody talked to me about smoking actual just like pipe tobacco. Not really my thing, right? I tried it because I smoke cigars. I was willing to engage in that. Again, it's a vice. Do it at your own risk. But I tried it. Hey, not for me. Right? Try this man stuff. If it's not for you, there's nothing stating that you have to commit to this. Right? But I'm willing to believe wholeheartedly within the depths of my soul that you will feel the positive benefits of this, and other people will see a difference in you that will be for the better. All right? Now, how will we do this? How will we create a maxim of manhood? We will do it by teaching. Men have this great skill to teach. The problem has been that men, again, often found that keeping our emotions bottled up tight is a very effective defense mechanism, and it is. Right? Having defense mechanisms isn't the problem, but it does make teaching harder. Teaching is an intimate and often emotional experience for everybody involved. Squashing emotions under heel is going to make that harder or keep teaching from happening altogether. Now, men are emotional. God, as a species, it's crazy how emotional we are. Men process emotions differently than women, but we are probably just as emotional. I mean, I'd be willing to put something on that. That's hard to hear, but it's not a weakness if we're capable of mastering them. In fact, they can be a real asset. Don't believe me? That's fine. But before we walk away with that thought, let me ask you, have you ever seen a hardened man with a puppy? How hard is that man after an hour? How about after a week? He picks up the little guy and starts giving it, and the puppy starts licking him, like giving him kisses. Dogs are man's best friend because they've always brought out the emotional that we need to express. And no matter how hard the guy is, he's gonna be like, oh my God, look at this cute little, oh, I just want to eat your face. That's how we feel. But it's because we have those emotions inside us. That dog didn't create that. It gave us a medium that we are programmed to. And it gave us a medium through which we can express that. Right? And it's always been perceived as safe because that vulnerability is an asset to the dog. It's not necessarily an asset to everybody else. So us showing emotion and reacting to emotion is not always viewed by your wife, your girlfriend, your kids, your friends. It's not viewed as a positive thing in a lot of cases. Right? But that dog, all it wants to know is that you feel things for it or to it, around it. It just loves you unconditionally. Right? And actually, this is a point that's made in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is something we'll talk about in our next episode when we're talking about building bonds of brotherhood. All right? So you guys ever see a man take over as an active stepdad? You see the exact same thing. Now, this is it's a trap that men often fall into, and I can't tell you how many stories I've read from real men who married a woman with kids. They get attached just like to this dog, but it's deeper. This little dude, this little kid, boy, girl, like whatever. Little kids emulate this guy, and this man starts to, it really starts to do function as a man. It's lighting up his cardinal responsibilities, and he's feeling fulfilled. Now, when those marriages fail, man, those children are not yours. I'm sorry. No matter how much time you've invested, no matter how many tears you've soothed or noses you've wiped, you have no right to a relationship with those kids that you've been raising if it falls apart with mom. The pure rage, the despair that I've witnessed in men in these situations prove unequivocally that men are incredibly emotional. And I cannot stress enough how much I empathize with these gentlemen. It would crush me if I were ever put in that situation. I got into this, this was almost an option for me when I got out of college before I met my wife. I went on a couple dates with this girl, and she had 2 kids, both 6 and 2, and I was 24 years old and could not wrap my head around being a parent or even functioning as a parent to those kids at that age. You grow with your own kids. And I encourage you, if you're going to have a relationship, do one stably, get married first. Make sure you pick the right girl, because I cannot tell you how many times I've had that discussion with a gentleman who picked the wrong one or knocked up some random woman and decided to try to make it work. I encourage that man to try, because that is his kid, and that's the most stable situation he could possibly create. But to be honest with you, before you have kids, be married. Have a stable relationship. Be focused on it. And doing these things will be better for you, better for the kids involved, and it will help you avoid situations where your kids can get ripped away from you, where you've got no recourse. Now, the justice system right now is not really aimed at being equal to men, right? So I get it. Your kids, my kids, could still be ripped from me today, right? But I'm at far less of a risk for that because I have a stable relationship. So the possibility of divorce is far lower to start with. But also, I do have a claim to them. They are my biological kids. All right? So food for thought. Keep on that. And men, I'm going to tell you, wrap it up. Okay? Be in a committed relationship before you get into this situation. Okay? Now, North American Kings isn't scared of the emotional whirlwind that will come with this mission of ours. All right? We want to be the teachers. We want to have talks about real issues that men deal with. Men build bonds. We always do it, almost too well. Bonds of brotherhood, bonds with children, bonds with animals, women, employers, mentors, you name it. It's an essential skill for men to learn, and it's especially important for us to hone these skills. Now, without these bonds, men fail and we spiral. We are self-destructive by nature. Now, while women need these relationships as well, we're going to embark on this series, so over the next few episodes, where we discuss in specific detail how men can go about building these relationships in a positive way. The reason for this is because we must do it completely different than when women do. They build relationships completely different. Now, there's a different dynamic, and it was not going to translate well, so we're going to focus again for you, the man. Now, that leads us to the topic that we'll be discussing for the next couple weeks, all right? Now, in North American Kings, and more specifically, Glenn Kowalski fashion, we're going to go for big air right out of the gate. Why? Because it's come up. We cannot avoid this. So today, I want to discuss men's relationship with sex. Intercourse, the horizontal dance, etc. Why? The reason we want to talk about this is because this topic has cropped up too often in both my private and actually public spaces for me to ignore this. Now remember, I wanted to talk about brotherhood. We're going to get to that. All right? This is something that will be needed. Will be discussed. This thing will happen. Okay? You will run into this in your life. You're a man. It will happen. Okay? Even the nerdiest guy has a relationship with sex. Okay? So I know this might be a little bit difficult, okay? So bear with me. This discussion here today has split the population of men in half. For weeks, I've seen this in discussion, both in person and online. There are men out there who believe the old rule. Men are sexual beings and should sow their wild oats and go out there and fornicate with little regard as to who or how often it happens. Or however you say that grammatically, I apologize. It's almost a point of pride for some men to have the highest number of partners, right? So you can see, I mean, I'll be honest with you, go back to high school. Okay, you can see in most high schools, women and girls can tell which men or which boys in those schools have lost their virginity. It's definitely a sign that you've matured into primal manhood, but that's not the point of the discussion here. Anyone can. Men, on the other hand, we are instruments of precision and strength. So here's the North American King's stance. Sexual relationships should be engaged between two consenting adults who are in a committed relationship. Notice, I didn't say marriage, although you can't get more committed, and it is the healthiest of situations out there. The biblical sense that both parties should wait for marriage and the benefits can't be overstated. We will hit this later in this episode. However, humans are at war with this particular drive, men specifically. So I'll admit, the likelihood of convincing any teen to accept abstinence at face value is next to zero. I would and did laugh at this when I was coming of age. All right? So I understand. It's natural to believe that anything stated that we aren't meant to explore our bodies, our bodily urges, particularly when we're physically wired to need this. I know that's... It almost doesn't feel natural, doesn't feel right. I would be skeptical if I were you too. Let me make the case, okay? I need everyone to think objectively about this subject matter. I will build the case for you. I care about you. I do. I cannot overstate that enough. I care about you. I care about my kids. I care about you as an adult. The times I've got to tell dad, hey, look, you made a mistake. You made that decision to impregnate someone random, and you're dealing with the consequences, or you didn't have a stable family life because your father messed around a lot and no one taught you. And if you pull out of that, it's a great happenstance, right? But I care about all of your situations. Like, me correcting that is not a dig at anybody. It's certainly not a dig at you guys for thinking in this way. I did. No one talks about this stuff. That's why we're here. All right. I care about you and would not be putting this point out there if the risks and rewards weren't real. And they absolutely are. So let's start with the basics. All right. Sex and the associated emotions are real and important. Okay. Personal story time. I had a relationship that I wanted to be serious back when I was in college. Now, we treated it as serious, but it ultimately wasn't a compatible relationship. Now, when you force those, they can become toxic like this one did. And because of that, we would break up and then we'd get back together and we're on and off and so on and so forth. Right? The girl I was with had a higher sex drive than I did, which is saying something for me at the time. Now, the reason I mentioned this is that while we were off, she'd still want to maintain a physical relationship where I was the one who was like, hey, like, we're not together. I don't want to be like, use you. I feel like I was using you or using her. So she's the one who still wanted to maintain a physical relationship. And I resisted, and I'll be honest with you, I resisted successfully several times, and I did fail a few times. And I felt awful for that afterwards. But because sex is awesome, okay? I'm not denying that, and neither should you. All right? But that's all the more reason why we need to not indulge in this vice. All right? Now, when this happened, I'd be the one to try to like rekindle the relationship. Now, she even called me out on this. She said I was the one who was getting attached and that I shouldn't. But to be honest, I was attached. But I was also trying to keep tabs on her to make sure she didn't like wind up pregnant without me knowing about it because I wanted to be responsible. Now, you might be saying to yourself, sweet deal. Sex, and you don't have to be responsible for it. However, it wasn't always me that tried to rekindle things. And even she said that she used sex as a way to maintain some sort of bond between us because she wanted that to work out where I was convinced that it wouldn't. The greater point is meaningless sex degrades us as men and doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a meaningless relationship. It always leads to an emotional tie. Always. There's an episode of Seinfeld on this. Like, again, it's just like, it's almost one of those pure truths that people deny wholeheartedly because we want to. We've decided, hey, look, I would rather believe that I can just do whatever I want because it physically feels good than deal with, hey, you know what, I do get weird every time we get together. I do feel bad or attached or lonely, whatever, right? It's an absolute truth. It happens. Now, from a secular perspective, it's denying my place in the relationship to have a meaningless relationship. Cardinal responsibility time. Treating myself as an object to be bartered denies my worth as a provider and a protector. For women who do this, who treat themselves as object, deny their inherent worth as something to be cherished and the givers of life that they are, the maintainers of the household, the things that we need as men to build ourselves up. We will touch that point later, right? Women who are promiscuous deny themselves these things as well. Now, the bigger point, whether or not you know it, you are bonded. Same girl during a different period where we weren't strictly together. Someone, a brother of mine, that I held him in esteem. He made a move on her. Now, I was out of town visiting some family, and this guy makes a pass at my girl or at this girl that I didn't think I was bonded to. Well, guess what? Word gets to me two ways. A real brother caught wind of this and gave me a phone call. It was a bit of a shock, and I'm actually glad that I got to prepare myself before I saw anybody in person. Now, to my girl's credit, that night I got back, she approached me and told me in person that this friend of mine had done this, and he propositioned her. I was out in public, wasn't in her place or anything like that. But while I was furious at this guy, regardless of the relationship status between the girl and me, I was shocked to discover that she felt some sort of violation as well. Now, this guy that I had invited into my home, exposed her to, he violated the same loose bond that she felt between us because we had a relationship physically, right? These relationships do exist, even when we clearly did not really want one, right? We were not together at this time, but there was still a lingering something. Those bonds exist. Guys, what do you do in this situation? Do you ever trust that dude again? I don't know about you, but I couldn't, and I tried. I confronted him. He groveled. And we even tried, we went on a couple, dudes just hanging out things. Like, we go out to a restaurant, eat some food. We're in college. Who hangs out at their house then? But, he even offered for me to punch him in the face, which is not a small thing to allow. I ended up just walking away, and I've only spoken to him once in 11 years since. Now, I ask these questions to get you thinking about what sex is worth to you emotionally. Now, what happens when your best friend and girlfriend or even your ex-girlfriend get together? Let's say they agree. Are you going to be cool about that? And if you are, does that coolness feel a little hollow? Are you really cool, or are you just putting on a strong face? Like, no, I don't care. If you're able to do that, great. Right? But let's drive the nail in deep. I mentioned we're going for big air in this episode. Now, if sex is meant to be free of commitment, right? Even back in biblical times, to the times, even before Judeo-Christian religions came out and the reign of the Greek and Roman gods was there, then why was rape a staple weapon of war, both then and now? And yes, I mean now. For those teens listening to this may be a sensitive subject and you may want to skip ahead a few minutes. If you're under the illusion that this world was a nice place, I'm glad I'm the one here to tell you that this world can be both a cruel and dangerous place to be in. The reason I'm glad it's me is because I'm also the guy who can tell you that this world is capable of incredible beauty, love, and inspiration to you personally. All right? Now, the evil of rape as a weapon is consistent through time. Now, it is evil, all right? And let's call a spade a spade. It is evil. Now, in the article, Rape as a Weapon of War and Its Long-Term Effects on Victims and Society, Cassandra Clifford outlines the facts of this phenomenon in a very crisp and clinical fashion. The article is linked in the show description. From the article, the use of rape as a weapon is one of the most violent and humiliating offenses inflicted on the enemy. The brutalization of rape permanently scars the victim's mind, soul, and often body. Rape is often used as a predecessor to murder, where others survive only to serve as a daily reminder to those around them of the tragedies of war. Victims are shunned by their families and communities, and many become pregnant as a result of their rapes. Rape leaves a permanent reminder of war and of the enemy through the birth of a child, which places both the mother and the child in continual victimization and isolation. Rape as a weapon of war affects not only the rape victim, but their entire family, village, and community. It's sickening. Okay? Imagine if you are willing to put yourself there, and I understand if you're not, that you're a soldier fighting for your homeland. You're days away from home. You're on the front, and you get word that your home city was attacked and that the buildings are burning and people are being raped. Imagine the fear you'd be in for your wife, your sister, your mother, even the other guys that are left behind. Even further, should this travesty befall your significant other, your wife, your sister, your mother, even in modern times, imagine the damage done to everyone with this one vile act. Now, aside from the devastation to the actual victim of this, as a secondary party, would you ever feel like you were capable of protecting your home if you failed in this one way in particular? Would you ever feel like you were capable? It's demoralizing. It affects the home front. It affects the warriors away that even don't have to come back and I don't want to say clean up the mess, but don't have to come back and deal with the ramifications of what just happened. We failed. That's what that does. That's why they do it. Again, from the article, a testimonial from a victim. My husband insults me every day, calling me the wife of the militiaman who raped me. And when I ask my husband to give me some food, he replies to me, "Why don't you go and ask for food to your husband in the forest?" Now, I am not condoning the husband's attitude towards his victimized wife in this example, but I do understand where his particular pain comes from. Now, let's come back. It's recognized universally that the act of sex is significant. The level of consequences it has is often debated, but it's important to men and women. As men form bonds incredibly easily, again, think back to that. Why is it important? There are examples in both war, in our personal lives, and like in both war and peace, we can see that there are bonds created, whether or not we want to admit that they're there or not. Sex is it is a thing. It's emotional. There's no two ways about it. All right. And I bring up some of those gruesome examples to emphasize that it's a known thing, that this is something to be taken seriously. Even though men out there's another whole camp of us that have stated, hey, go, it's meaningless. Go do whatever. And the people from the 60s and 70s who were all about free love, they are, you can tell who those people are. It does affect them. All right. Now, the respect you show these bonds, be it familial or sexual, reflects something back onto yourself. It affects you. That's why a handful of powerful relationships can overpower a multitude of loose relationships. Now, that is also a universal truth. This is precisely why my wife and I have a standing no threesome rule. Now, I've had this debate with a few friends recently, right? This conversation has happened, right? I've actively invoked this in the 10 years that I've been with my wife. Why would we feel the need to stipulate something like this? Well, one, as I can prove, these things do get talked about. They happen. But secondly, nothing comes good from that situation. Even before we had kids, insecurity can still kill a relationship. So let's go to husband-wife time where it's just us. There's no house, there's no kids to be affected. Why would it matter? Well, again, I take my relationship seriously, and you should too, but what if you really enjoyed it? The most chilling words I've ever heard in this type of situation was the question, well, what if it's awful? And the subsequent response, what if it's the best thing you've ever experienced? Now, even if you tell your girl that you only need her and that you don't need these other people, you've actively proved that that's not necessarily true. You accepted help in that regard of your relationship on her behalf from somebody else. What if she doesn't believe you and she's now constantly insecure about your desire for her? Is she going to start treating you like you cheated or that you're more likely to cheat? And this flips too, ladies. If you want another guy, your guy's going to get weird about this. We do. Ultimately, it will. All right. Now, again, nothing good comes from that. The degradation of your primary relationship. This flies completely contrary to the lines you'll hear from men who think that, to be a man, you've got to just kind of screw around and prove that women want you. Men, yes, you want to prove how wanted you are. Exercise some patience and do this. Make yourself something to be desired. In high school, this may be becoming the great performer on stage, that great actor who just has girls fawning over him. We all know that guy. The performing arts guy has just as much game as the football star. But either way, those two gentlemen have made themselves something to be desired. In college, this may be becoming the standout scholar in your major. As a married man with kids, I've got crazy game. Women see men with a baby in his arms and two kids, obediently following. Woof. I get crazy looks. But think about that. A relatively young guy has enough money to afford 3 kids, is an experienced hand at managing them because of all 3 are out by themselves with dad, and he's nurturing enough to be carrying the youngest and leading the other 2. That small projection of command or of authority or power or my ability to provide sends all the right messages, regardless of whether I'm actively talking to anybody. All right? Now, you don't need to sow your wild oats in order for women to want you. All right? That's fallacy number 1. Okay? Make yourself something to be desired and take yourself seriously. Now, there's a greater point to be made here. From The Marketing of Evil by David Kapelian, humans have a dual nature, lower animal-like nature, and we also have a conscious-driven nature. This is the driving line between the 2 sects of men on this issue. Sex drive is so powerful and compelling, especially to men, that sex can easily influence us. And as men, we want to avoid the possibility of being manipulated by anything. Addiction, fear, emotions, people, a sex drive. We cannot let that affect our decision. The sexual revolution gave everybody what they wanted, not necessarily what they needed. Now, it's hard to ignore people who are, again, telling you that your deepest urges should be surrendered to and then that it's good for you. I mean, that's something that a lot of people accepted because they wanted to. Hey, we're not thinking of the consequences. It's the cycle of addiction. To fulfill yourself in the wrong way leads down this path. Right? If you fulfill yourself with the right things, you will feel fulfilled by that every time. Now, taking the wrong route, seeking gratification in the wrong things, ultimately leads you down a cycle of escalation where the same fix doesn't always get you the same gratification next time. You see this with drugs, you see this with vice, and now we're seeing this with sex. You need more and more. Seeking women in the wrong way can lead you to need more and more and more from them to feel the same amount of gratification. So a quote from the book: men are born all but addicted to women. Men compulsively look to women in terms of gratification. Women quickly catch on to this terrible weakness men have for them. A weakness not only for physical gratification, but for the ego, support, and reassurance that usually come with it. And they discover that they have a tremendous power over men they never asked for. Thus, if women are not careful, they can easily become as addicted to men's need for them as their men are to sex, and then they'll compulsively promote their man's weaknesses for the sake of power over him. Now, this is true, and most of us can agree on that. Last week, we mentioned staying active both spiritually and physically can be an active defense against this. Finding self-gratification can keep us from needing women in order to be fulfilled and to feel happy. Again, be the alpha at one thing. That will give you the same amount of gratification every time. Now this will allow for us to more readily exercise the right amount of patience while we select the right partner to be with. Now, I can't wait to get to this part of the actual episode. The great Dennis Prager strikes again. Now, I'm a huge fan of this guy. I've spoken to him in person. I've seen him in person in conferences. This guy is, again, one of the most foremost conservative philosophers of our modern age. I'm a huge fan. And now I get to cite one of his early award-winning essays in order to make a point that, one, I think he'd be proud of, but one that will help you directly. All right? I'm introducing you again to the wonders of Dennis Prager. So his famous and award-winning essay, Judaism, Homosexuality, and Civilization, puts things in stark relief. Now, originally published in Crisis Magazine in 1993, this article makes some fascinating claims about why men should restrain themselves. All right. Now, it mentions homosexuality. That's not the point of this particular episode. So you're going to read this and get hit with some of that. But remember, this is broadly applied to men. All right. Now, remember, Dennis Prager started out as a religious philosopher, and he got into the radio business, doing a weekend show out in LA, specifically on religion, and then he moved into conservatism and politics, right? So he's a practicing Jew and one of the most brilliant minds I've ever had the chance to converse with. So he writes, Judaism is worried about what happens to men and to society when men do not channel their passions into marriage. In this regard, the Torah, so that's the Old Testament, okay, so just to take a break from that. So in this regard, the Torah and Judaism were highly prescient. The overwhelming majority of violent crimes are committed by unmarried men. Thus, male celibacy as a sacred state in many religions is also a sin in Judaism. In order to become fully human, male and female must join. In the words of Genesis, God created the human, male and female, he created them. The union of male and female is not merely some lovely ideal, it is the essence of the Jewish outlook of becoming human. To deny it is tantamount to denying the primary purpose of life. So Mr. Prager makes the point, deviating from marital sex being the ideal state leaves the door open to any and all other ideal states, right? You know, specifically to sex, like now, all of a sudden the door's open to incest. You know, brother, sister, mother, son, like any of that stuff, right? Sexual relationships, again, like mutually consensual adultery. You know, it's the slippery slope argument, right? And some people will call this a logical fallacy, but it's increasingly becoming more and more correct given the right amount of time as the variable in that equation. Right? And when X happens, it can or will lead to Y. Now, we are consistently seeing this. An example, you know, the trans movement. Saying that I identify as something implies that the reality is verified by your words, not by like actual reality, right? So your words are form reality when in fact they do not. Substance does matter, right? Rachel Dolezal, former president of the Spokane chapter of the NAACP, has claimed for years that she was black. Now, this all dropped back in 2015. She's in fact completely white and has been masquerading as a black woman for years and then reaping the benefits of that. You know, this happened after conservatives said that trans folks, like during this whole Section 8 Supreme Court thing, you know, said that trans folks shouldn't be able to dictate what gender they are. Conservatives said that by claiming that these objective facts were in fact subjective, that nothing was then off the table. And then this happens, right? So Miss Dolezal claims an arbitrary race. And very, very soon afterwards, in the same year, you get a 52-year-old man decides he wants to not just be a woman, but he's going to be a 6-year-old now. Now, this same dude found a family to adopt him as an 8-year-old, right? And then he decided, I'm going to identify as 6 because his adopted sister wanted to be the older sister, right? It's a crazy escalation, but it happened. And there are some discussions up and down about how legit this, particular claim is, but again, a 52-year-old man is being encouraged to pursue this type of lifestyle. I don't think so. Come on. Right, but the slippery slope, they said it wouldn't happen. Here we are. All right? We got people marrying themselves. Right? Like, you can't claim the slippery slope if every time we say, hey, this is going to happen, it happens. All right? We said 15 days to slow the spread. It's not going to be 15 days. It's been more than 15 months. All right? So whenever you want to invoke slippery slope, just know that a lot of times it's actually, it does happen. All right? Now, this Dennis Prager article mentions how men become more destructive than women do when we do not restrain ourselves. So like to move on from that point. To quote, when male sexuality is not controlled, the consequences are considerably more destructive than when female sexuality is not controlled. Men rape, women do not. Men, not women, engage in fetishes. Men are not frequently consumed by their sex drive and wander from sex partner to sex partner. Men, not women, are sexually sadistic. The indiscriminate sex that characterizes much of male homosexual life represents the they're the antithesis of Judaism's goal of elevating human life from the animal-like to the godlike. All right? Now, while Mr. Prager may be slightly off in that women certainly don't engage in fetishes and the overall point, that they don't rape, and they do sometimes, or that they can't be sadistic. Again, some of this is gray. But the overall point is generally recognized that men do have a stronger desire and need to be more animalistic. All right. Now, there's a secondary point throughout this entire piece that I do want to bring up, and that is boys and girls, where we get back to our original mission. Yeah, Mr. Prager makes the point that this is one of the fundamental reasons that Western society has prospered and accelerated faster than others in modern history. Okay, let me continue. The Judeo-Christian culture has thrived almost uniquely in the world. Now, Mr. Prager puts a lot of this on the religions themselves, and he makes a brilliant point. Quote, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth by his will, not through his sexual behavior. This was an utterly radical break from other religions, and it alone changed human history." So the other religions, most of them are polytheistic, so that is of many gods, right? Emphasize the paternalistic relationship between each other. Zeus is wed to Hera, right? If you want to go back to the Greek mythology. And Zeus is married to Hera, but he still cheats on that wife of his and sires many, many demigods and heroes like Hercules and Perseus. Here's the thing. There's also major trouble that comes from that. Hera is she's not going to just take that. So clearly, even the gods were like, hey, don't cheat on each other, right? Because she spent her entire time. So most of Hercules' life, for example, he was pursued by a vicious, vengeful, like his father's real wife, right? Like he lived a life as a bastard, right? So Hera spends Hercules' entire life trying to kill him, and the same for Perseus. Like this, again, even in these old religious studies, in these stories, it's not like a peaceful thing, right? There's also trouble like the Trojan War, which was fought over a beautiful woman who was a baby when the whole war started, by the way. But because the gods were vain and you had Aphrodite, who's supposed to be like Venus, she's supposed to be the prettiest. You've got Hera, and you've got this girl, I think. And I think there may have been a third god, I forget, right? But they had Paris pick which god was prettier. And that's what started the Trojan War. All right? Now, men, if you ever have to publicly choose which woman is hotter, make sure the ones you don't pick cannot start a war over it. All right? The best thing you can do, best case, walk away. All right? If you want to pursue one of those girls that you're judging, talk to her after the show. Okay? Like, come on. Like, you don't need to publicly humiliate the women like that. And it does not end well, regardless. Right? So the Judeo-Christian religions strips this and makes us focus more on our relationship with one woman, which we've talked about has a ton of benefits. Mr. Prager concludes, Judaism places controls on sexual activity. It could no longer dominate religion and social life. It was to be sanctified, which in Hebrew means separated from the world and placed in the home, in the bed of husband and wife. Judaism's restricting of sexual behavior was one of the essential elements that enabled society to progress. And it did so because we were able to benefit from the complementary relationships between those in committed relationships. Again, that's the North American King's stance. Committed relationship. Boyfriend, girlfriend, at the least. All right? Because this stability creates, Westerners were able to focus on building up society because men were strengthened by this. To our original point, we became more And when men became more, we affected everybody else around us positively, deeply. It was phenomenal. Right? Now, Mr. Prager's final point in the essay was about becoming more godlike. The point is something very important. While some philosophies encourage us to encourage our baser passions, virtues, and other philosophies that encourage us to better ourselves towards a truly moral ideal should be the ones sought. So what is our responsibility in some of this? One, men, we need to restrain ourselves. Avoid the hurt that you will feel in your souls bouncing from woman to woman. And avoid the damage you'll do to those women and to any kids that come out of that, or any kids already attached to them. Right? We haven't talked about that, but let's say one of those women has children, and you are a frequent flyer for a little while. They're going to start to bond to you too, and then you will be the one to cut that clear. You're damaging everybody in the process. Worse, get one of them pregnant, catch a disease, or you may inadvertently change your life forever. Now, when I was a teenager, my parents said that should I ever get a girl pregnant, they'd help me out, but they'd never treat me like an adult ever again. That was enough for me. I wanted that respect, and believe me, I went out and tried to earn it. You may be motivated by different things, but in this case, be selfish, okay? Be selfish in the long run, right? Having a kid early would have killed that dream. I would have stayed with that kid and I would have made other dreams, but the idea is that the you that you're planning for, well, take it seriously. Now, in this day and age, men are also more likely to be accused of rape during a one-night encounter than if you're with a steady girlfriend. Right? These stories continue to pop up in the news, and it's unfortunate. Some of them are actually not even rape cases. So women do lie about that, gentlemen. Right? So give yourself an alibi at the very least. Right? Now, I'm not just discounting. So if women have been sexually assaulted or raped, again, I've said at the very beginning, that's an evil thing. But when they lie about it, it drastically affects men more than it does women when they lie. Right? So when women go to jail for lying about this, they should. But we also want to make sure that you men don't have to deal with the implications of that lie. All right? That's harder to prove that you just went out and did that if you're in a committed relationship, and people know that you're in a committed relationship with the same girl who's accusing you of this. Right? Now, at this point, again, you've got at least reason for being there and likely witnesses. So our second responsibility, hold the line. Now, I've recently been discussing with folks, this is the video that's been floating around the internet. I will not post it because I do not want to be gratifying this, but a boy who's got Down syndrome is riding this mechanical bull with this older woman in like this blue and white jumpsuit. Now, she's in front, he's on the back, and of course, this bull, on this mechanical bull, the driver kind of makes it incredibly sexual, right? Now, I've been told that this is the boy's teacher, and if that's the case, it would be wildly appropriate. Now, I've seen one or two reports that claim it's his mother. None of this stuff has been verified, but my issue on this whole thing is that people are laughing and making fun of this. They're saying, hey, it's like funny, like, go boy, go, go get yours, but again, we're not protecting that kid in any way, right? Now, he may be having fun, but as men, it's our job to protect this kid included, right? The benign assumption that this is his teacher would be us condoning this behavior in other circumstances. Whether this kid knows the implications or not, it doesn't matter. I've seen more hot teacher, teenage boy news stories in the past 2 years than I have at any time previously. Now, I can remember my father having this conversation with me, and this is how it went. Hey, Glenn, no sex with teachers, even if she's hot. And my dad, and he said it to me, looking me right in the eyes, like, Glenn, don't do that. And it's good advice. However, as a raging teenager, all I could think to say was, I don't know about that, Dad. For sure I would partake if she was attractive enough. Right now, my dad did mention that I'd be shunned by the other students and teachers, and I'd probably be on the news, and none of the inner consequences were discussed. The things that it would do to me, personally, because I'd be bonding to someone who was in fact violating me. Right? So it's probably because he didn't know, because no one really teaches this stuff. It's something we have to figure out. It may be seen as a rite of passage, but that rite of passage, to gain the knowledge, you must commit to the knowledge. You must do that to yourself in order to find out. I don't think that's necessarily the right way to do things. So here we are, picking up where others couldn't continue. Exercise some patience, ladies and gentlemen. It's timeless advice. But that's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. If you liked this episode, please follow and subscribe to our show for free. Also, please leave us a 5-star review. This helps us get recommended on all the apps and out there. So we would really appreciate that. We're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, and wherever else you get your content. Good luck out there.